Hello and welcome to Original Soundchat, where video game music is a work of art. On each episode, it's our goal to help you learn about two soundtracks from the world of games, as well as the people, stories, and critical tracks behind them. My name is Joe DeVader.
And I'm Peter Spezia. We're brought to you by Anonymous Dinosaur and Rhymes with Asia. It's time to appreciate great OSTs and the games that they come from, without getting too bogged down in music theory. Up first for our two games this week is 2007's Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare, the distilled perfection of the first-person shooter genre at the time, which launched the franchise towards what we know it as today.
After that, it's the creepy teen thriller about dealing with ghosts who communicate through the radio, 2016's Oxenfree.
Spooky October continues on your end.
Damn right.
But what could the theme this week be? No submarines in this Call of Duty Modern Warfare game.
I was so sad when you told me that.
But, maybe I've got the military in my game. You've got forts in your game. That kind of works, right?
Yeah, Oxenfree takes place at a decommissioned military fort. You can draw some lines there.
There's some connections there. It's a pretty tenuous strand otherwise, but I think it works for two randomly selected games based off of game releases this week. Joe, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty all right. I have been quite busy this week, as I'm sure you can relate. And it's been a lot of reviews, a lot of schoolwork. I did get a chance to finally finish Link's Awakening last night.
Nice.
It's good. That's about all I can say. I got one major problem with it, one of which is music related.
Yeah.
But other than that, it just drowns, especially when you get it at Telltale Heights. And it's like, all right, I was enjoying the cool song, but I guess we're listening to this now.
Oh, and the text prompt again for the power-ups, you don't say, huh?
Oh, man, so that's what the Guardian Acorn does. It's not like this is the 10th one I've picked up in the past hour. Just,
I can definitely relate there. I'm still coughing away. I'm not a fan. Not too cool with it. But we're going to persevere. And let's talk about some of the composer follow-up headlines from the past week, where we kind of follow and look and see what some of the composers we've talked about on previous episodes of Original Soundchat. See what they're doing now. See what they're doing today. What are they up to? They're still doing work. Composers like Austin Wintory and Darren Korb. Composers we've talked about plenty of times on this segment in particular, but they sat down and they recorded a conversation podcast episode together. And this is through the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences. But if you want to hear them talk about certainly that Supergiant 10th anniversary concert where Darren Korb, was responsible for and performed some of the music, and Austin Wintory conducted the chamber orchestra. Check that out. Great conversation between two fantastic composers.
I haven't had a chance to give it a look yet, but I sent it to you with the idea of look, it's so cool. And you're right. They have really, I think of all of them, these two are the two that have shown up the most out of anybody we've brought up on this segment.
They're working a lot, and we like them a lot, so it goes hand in hand.
Also, related to an episode from a couple weeks ago, Skullgirls is out today on Nintendo Switch, finally. So that Switch and Xbox One port that we were talking about before, I don't know if the Xbox One port is out today as well, but the Switch port is. I know that for a fact, so go check it out.
Yeah, so while you're listening to this episode, go on and download it. And hopefully the multiplayer is better than on PC.
Here's hoping.
So I think that's pretty much it we have for the headlines this week. So let's get right into our first game, Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare. And boy, it's hard to ignore Call of Duty's current significance in the video game industry, right? Constantly among the best-selling game, among those lists of the year. People wonder, when will the series slow down? And it just doesn't. But if you go back and look at Call of Duty's origins, the first game was made by developer Infinity Ward in 2003, and it was followed up by another Infinity Ward sequel in 2005, Call of Duty 2. Treyarch then took the reins for a third game in 2006, and I think that was among the launch titles for Xbox 360 and all that, with Call of Duty 3. But that was because Infinity Ward was hard at work for the fourth game in the series, where you have Call of Duty 4, Modern Warfare. These first three Call of Duty games, they were all World War II inspired shooters. But Infinity Ward kind of wanted to mix things up a little bit and have a more modern day setting for this new generation of consoles, and kind of put their focus there. So Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare was released on November 5th, 2007 in North America for Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, and PC. Australia got it on the 7th, Europe on the 9th. So really only a couple days apart. That's pretty good. I forgot, but was remembered once I saw this, just flashbacks to working in video game retail.
All right.
Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare was released on the same day as a Nintendo DS version of the game with the exact same title. I could not tell you if they were the same story or comparable experiences at all, but it's interesting to think, modern consoles, but it doesn't come on the Wii. It comes on the DS instead, and not with a different title at all. I think that if someone wants to do like a video documentary or whatever, it's like, what is the story behind the DS version of Call of Duty 4?
Stop skeletons from fighting. This sounds like entirely up your alley. I want to see a video on this, please.
I mean, it's a story waiting to be told. And Nintendo would have to wait a couple more years to get the game on Nintendo Wii, because Treyarch would port the game as Call of Duty Modern Warfare Reflex Edition. And you're like, oh yeah, that name sounds kind of familiar if you own the Wii. And it's like, all right. Note that they dropped the 4. It was Call of Duty Modern Warfare Reflex Edition. That was a worldwide release on November 10th, 2009. Then you got Call of Duty Modern Warfare Remastered, which was infamously released as part of the special edition bundles for 2016's Call of Duty Infinite Warfare. And that was on PS4, Xbox One, and PC, November 2016. And there's like, you can only get Modern Warfare Remastered as part of this bundle. It won't be available otherwise, until it was a standalone game in June 2017. So
yeah, because people were mad.
Yeah, so kind of relented there. So this game has had several iterations, whether it was a DS game, the original, the Wii version, the remaster, because there's eventually, this week, there's a soft reboot, and it's called Call of Duty Modern Warfare.
Oh my God.
I don't get it. It's kind of taking some things from the story, but changing others. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I know that's a game my brother's going to definitely get, so I'll have to try it, just out of curiosity. But this is why we're talking about the original Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare. If you're wondering, like, why not Modern Warfare 2? That is the better soundtrack with Hans Zimmer and moments like No Russian. I agree with you. I like that game more, but when you have the soft reboot of the Modern Warfare series, of the Modern Warfare game, you kind of go back to the original here. The one that really changed Call of Duty forever, honestly. And this is a game that's developed by Infinity Ward, published by Activision. Obviously, Call of Duty is a first-person shooter, and it was known at the time for being a prime competitor to Halo, which was the big boy on the console market. I mean, Halo 3 came out just 2 months before, in September 2007. But Call of Duty, especially with Modern Warfare, it involves a faster pace of play, these boots on the ground style, and I'd say a more realistic amount of bullets to take down an enemy. Like, there's no such thing as like bullet sponging in Call of Duty. Like, it only takes a few to bring down your opponent. It's, I guess it's in a way it's a little more realistic that way. The story for Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare, it takes place in 2011, so a handful of years in the future from when the game came out, and a civil war has broken out in Russia between its government and these ultra-nationalists who are seeking to restore Russia to its Soviet-era glamour. Meanwhile, you have this separatist group led by Khaled al-Assad, and he's seized power in an unnamed Middle Eastern country. They said that it's small but oil-rich, but this unnamed Middle Eastern country, al-Assad seizes control through a coup d'etat. And because of al-Assad's anti-Western views, the United States find themselves compelled to be drawn into action and, stop al-Assad. So the player's perspective for these U.S.-centric missions are through Sergeant Paul Jackson of the United States Marine Corps, the 1st Force Recon unit. On the other kind of side of the world, you have the British Special Air Service, and they have their own missions to carry out through the eyes of Sergeant John McTavish, or as he's known as in this game, Soap. And Soap is led by his commanding officer, Captain John Price. Now they're kind of investigating what's going on with this Russian ultranationalist uprising, and are these different world events connected? So the main questions being, can the United States quell al-Assad's rise to power? And how are these Russian ultranationalists involved on the global stage? Joe, this is where I ask you, what are our experiences with Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare?
I have never touched a single Call of Duty game in my entire life.
Good for you.
That's not me boasting like, oh man, I haven't touched any of those games in the big popular series. It's just, I don't like shooters.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm not, even the shooters that are considered like Half-Life even, I'm just like, hey, it's all right. And so, Call of Duty is not a series that I've ever really been attached to. Same with Halo. Same with Battlefield. They're not, like, even Cyberpunk. I'm not super interested in Cyberpunk because it's a first-person shooter.
Oh, interesting.
So, yeah, it's nothing to do with, like, the game's popularity or anything. But yeah, I've never, not even the old ones, not even the new ones, none of them.
Mm-hmm. So, Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare was the first Call of Duty game I played. Like, I'm not big into the whole, like, World War II thing. But my brother at the time was building his first gaming PC, and this was the game he was really targeting to play. And so I got to play it as a result, not on PC, but it was my sophomore year at college at the time. And so I had, friends, sharing games in the dorms, and this is one I got to play, and like, it's pretty good. To the point where, like, when Modern Warfare 2 came out 2 years later, like, I remember buying that, going to the midnight launch and all that, and then No Russian happened, and that was the whole thing. But this is a game where, like, Call of Duty for me is pretty hit or miss. And, I do like the Modern Warfare games, to the point where, like, when I eventually played 3 much later than its release, the disc that I had was somehow scratched, and so I couldn't even make it past the first level without the game just hard crashing, freezing. So, yeah, I never finished that trilogy, but, these games are well made. Like, I can't deny the appeal of the time in which they were made and the polish and all of that. But yeah, I'm sure you go back to it now, 12 years removed, and there would be some jank to it, I bet. But it really held up at the time for 2007. So Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare, it was developed by a team of about 100 people over 2 years. And Infinity Ward really prides themselves on a low turnover, because they noted in a Gama Sutra postmortem that there was about 27 developers on 2002's Medal of Honor Allied Assault, which is the game that team, before they rebranded themselves as Infinity Ward, got away from EA. That was the game they made the year before the first Call of Duty. So out of the 27 original developers from that last Medal of Honor game at the time, before that series got another installment. They brought 20 of those people over through the Call of Duty series up to Call of Duty 4. You add about 80 plus people on top of that, like the kind of core of Infinity Ward had really carried on through. And so, like I mentioned, they really did want to get away from the World War II setting that Call of Duty had become known for in its first 3 installments. But they also chose to avoid referencing current real-life wars. And they also wanted to keep the series' common theme of 2 opposing forces of similar strength. And so how do you learn about how to make a military-style game? How do you get the right perspective? Well, the team attended apparently a live fire exercise at the Marine Corps Air Ground Combat Center 29 Palms, which is a training facility in the California desert. They wanted to get the sense of like the power of the military and how to simulate those effects in game. So, to be near an Abrams tank when it fires, like to take that personal experience and try to transpose it as best as possible in game. Also, get to talk to combat veterans, get their sense of what it's like to be in combat, all the emotions, everything that goes in it. And they also had veterans supervise mocap sessions for motion capture there, and also to make sure that the game's AI was functioning properly and believably. So getting the military involved in certain aspects to try to help the authenticity of the game. Development had really 2 main goals to make this game stand apart from past Call of Duty games in its 4th installment. They wanted to spend more time developing the multiplayer for the game, and they also wanted to tell a compelling story. Now, the multiplayer is certainly a great accomplishment when it comes to Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare. It was a big deal at the time, being toe-to-toe with Halo multiplayer, adding things like the idea of kill streak rewards to the series. As much as I'd like to say, I know all about it, I'm going to go in great detail about the multiplayer mode. It's not what the show's about. So I'm not going to do that. But I do want to stress the importance that, multiplayer was a big deal for this one, and it really just carried over into future Call of Duty installments. Many things about this game really changed that series for the masses. But when it comes to that prime experience, that shooting experience, first person, campaign, what have you, it was really important for Infinity Ward to maintain a 60 frame per second experience. And that's pretty key throughout all the Call of Duty games. But when we've talked about in the past of Gears of War really pushed it on Xbox 360 and was able to obtain 720p, Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare, the year after, apparently runs at a native 600p on PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, yet still maintaining that 60 frames per second gameplay. So it's just interesting to see, really how far we've come in 12 years. Games are now 4K HDR, and it's this was 600p at the time. Isn't that cute? That was on the first HD console.
My first reaction to that number was, that's low. And then I was like, wait, 2007, that wasn't low. What?
It was a pretty good accomplishment at the time, but we're just jaded now, I guess. One of the other things that really started with this iteration of Call of Duty, this was the game that established the exclusivity agreement with Microsoft at the time to have the multiplayer maps launch first on Xbox 360 before this was eventually broken in 2015 with kind of PlayStation taking those reins. But that lasted a long time with Microsoft, all starting with this game. Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare, very well reviewed, with Metacritic averages at 94 for the Xbox 360 and PS3 version, 92 on PC. Reviewers said it brought the genre to, quote, a new level of immersion and intensity that we had never seen before. And it was, the campaign and the multiplayer modes that were praised extensively with this high level of refinement and polish. But if anything, reviewers critiqued it for its linearity in the campaign. And one reviewer said, how it was a problem that it didn't revolutionize the genre. Which maybe you thought that at the time, but in hindsight, what? This was the game that changed everything for Call of Duty for many first-person shooters. So, yeah, like it or not, it was the polish that really presented it as an example of what the industry could aspire to, and in a way, that was how it revolutionized the genre.
Yeah, that's a really weird quote to look at now, because, like, obviously, you mentioned earlier, I think that Modern Warfare 2 is the one that, like, made Call of Duty the big guns.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, without this game's existence, think of how different the yearly release schedule would look.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Like, this laid the foundations for all of that. Absolutely.
Like, remember when we talked about Batman? And
yeah.
Part of the thing was, oh yeah, the marketing wanted to capture the Call of Duty crowd. That was the time when every single publisher was like, but we got to get that Call of Duty money. What can we do to get that Call of Duty money? And before that, I think it was Halo.
Mm-hmm.
But now it's Fortnite, I would assume.
But Call of Duty still has a big role to play.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Like, it's still among the top sellers of the year. So it's just crazy to think about. And it was absolutely the top selling game worldwide for 2007, with around 7 million copies sold by January 2008, almost 16 million copies sold by November 2013. This was before the remaster. This is before the remake, the reboot, if you will, this year. And yeah, it won plenty of awards at the time. You know, awards for video games were very different then. You know, best shooter, best action game, best Xbox 360 game, best graphics. There were some game of the years thrown in there. But let's be clear, 2007 was a pretty incredible year for video games. You had BioShock, Portal, Super Mario Galaxy, Halo 3, Mass Effect, God of War 2. It was a year.
I didn't realize all of those games came out the same year.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a big one. But so yeah, you know, Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare did win some awards, but pretty tough to compete against some of those where it's like, oh yeah, BioShock would probably win Game of the Year. Oh, yeah, this little game called Portal, like things like that. So obviously this inspired 2 sequels in the Modern Warfare series that continued the storyline. You did have 2009's Modern Warfare 2, as we mentioned, and 2011's Modern Warfare 3. Of course, notably, these games, also, you know, starting with 2008's Call of Duty World at War, dropped the number from the Call of Duty title. And so, yeah, this was the last time that it was Call of Duty blank, you know, subtitle, which is probably for the best, because if you consider last year's Call of Duty Black Ops 4, that technically would have been Call of Duty 15.
Very few franchises can get away with that. I'm looking at you, Final Fantasy.
Yeah, but you know, see, that is spread over years between releases. Mm-hmm. This is tick, tick, tick every year. Gotta make that money. Rotate between studios. Keep churning them out. No, sacrifice the campaign because you don't have enough time to work on it. Whip.
Yeah, the unfortunate result of this game's, because while this game has, of course, changed the face of the industry and the release schedule, for some people for the better. I am not one of those people. Not that I think it changed it for the worse. It's just they're not my kind of game. But like the unfortunate result of this game's success is that you always hear stories of Activision buying a studio and then being like, now you live in the Call of Duty mines. Though they haven't done this in a while. EA is the one that does that now. Where they buy a studio and they're like, now you're in the Battlefield mines.
Or you'll make something we like you to make. Oh, it didn't work well, so we'll close you forever.
Yeah.
But yeah, Raven Software definitely comes to mind. Like Raven Software used to be, you know, working for, you know, Star Wars, LucasArts, you know, making those games. And then Activision bought them. They worked a lot with Treyarch, did multiplayer stuff, and I guess that's kind of where they live now. So yeah, you're right. And for a while it was just Infinity Ward and Treyarch going back and forth. And then when next gen hit, it's like, oh, let's rotate every 3 years. So let's get Sledgehammer games in the mix. And that's kind of where we are now. But this is an Infinity Ward year. And so the reboot, the soft reboot, the remake, whatever you want to call it, of Call of Duty Modern Warfare does launch this Friday, October 25th, 2019. And it's crazy how far the game industry has come since then. You look at trailers for that game and yeah, Call of Duty makes money, so money can be pumped back into it. So there's a high quality and finesse of the output, even though the game might not be for some people. But you look at some of the cutscenes in that game and like the CG animations, like the facial animations. Video game graphics are getting to a crazy time, my friend.
Crazy time and crazy expensive.
Yeah, but then the price of games doesn't change. In fact, it's the race to the bottom with subscription services, and that's a whole thing for another time.
Woo, the industry's on fire!
Let's talk about the music, though, and the composer for Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare. That's Stephen Barton. Stephen Barton, born on September 17th, 1982 in Preston, England. Apparently, when he was a child, Barton was a chorister in the Winchester Cathedral Choir, and he later won a prestigious DFE Specialist Music Scholarship. So he went and studied piano and composition at Wells Cathedral School. Wells Cathedral School apparently was built in the 10th century, in 909 AD, and it is one of the oldest still existing schools in the world.
Damn.
So dude's got some really strong education behind him. When he was younger, though, he said his favorite classic game was the original Doom. He found the score particularly memorable, as one might if you work in music. But he said it was the first game that he played with someone via LAN, with the local area network, when they're in another room and they're connected through like a simple Ethernet cable, but they're not playing over any internet. It was just locally. He found that especially memorable. So his biography on his website says that he moved to Los Angeles in 2002. Many other sources said it was 2001. I'm going to trust his own website a little more than that. So he moved to LA and he got established with projects in Hollywood through Harry Gregson Williams. And we've talked about Harry Gregson Williams before through our Metal Gear Solid 2 episode. But Stephen Barton essentially was Gregson Williams' protege. So yeah, he worked with Gregson Williams on different projects for Hollywood, contributing music to Shrek 2, including the Fairy Godmother song, as well as the first 2 Chronicles of Narnia films. His biography also notes that he collaborates closely with Sir Anthony Hopkins, and he produced the soundtrack to Hopkins' movie Slipstream in 2006. Apparently they have worked together with the Dallas Symphony Orchestra, as well as touring in Italy with Jean-Yves Thibaudet and the Maggiore Musica di Firenze Orchestra. I'm going to hope that's right with some pronunciations on the fly. Anyway, Barton's company is named Afterlight Incorporated, and I think After blank is going to become relevant a little later for you. But Afterlight Incorporated, of course, based in Hollywood. You can find Stephen Barton on Twitter at Composer Barton. So what's in his discography? For video games, of course, Call of Duty 4, Modern Warfare. But then he found work continued with those Infinity Ward guys as they went over to Respawn. So he did the score for Titanfall and Titanfall 2 and Apex Legends, one of the biggest successes in video games this year. He is also composing on the score for Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, which launches in less than a month.
Oh, I forgot about that. Oh, no.
And that's crazy to think about because that game looks awesome.
It does.
And I'm excited for it. But that's a week after Death Stranding. What is 2019?
Which is just a couple weeks after Pokemon.
Pokemon is the same day as Star Wars Jedi.
Oh no, that's even worse.
It's just a wild time for video games. He's composed for some films, including Cirque du Soleil's Worlds Away, which I guess is a collaboration with James Cameron, and also the Megan Fox film Jennifer's Body. He composed the score for that one. For TV, he composed for G.I. Joe Resolute, which I guess there's some animator on a Beavis and Butthead movie who heard Barton's score in Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare, and he contacted him. He's like, yo, I want you to compose for this G.I. Joe TV show that I'm working on next. And so that's how he got that gig. He also worked on a show called Motor City, and currently working on Sci-Fi's 12 Monkeys. The notes about Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare's soundtrack and its development in particular. Harry Gregson Williams did help with the score a little bit. He composed the main themes to the game, but he really allowed Barton to do most of the writing and kind of take charge with it. Of course, World War II games and films really had their scores glorify the individual soldier and the battlefield, but Modern Warfare is different completely than World War II, where there's like a sense of political espionage afoot that Gregson Williams in particular had his scores for Enemy of the State and Spy Game. We've talked about that on his respective episode for Metal Gear Solid 2. Those scores really kind of helped exemplify this new sound of what modern warfare can be like. And so Barton said, quote, "We thus tried to give with the music a persistent sense of the fact that you're always part of a team, as well as a greater conflict in a much more geopolitical context, albeit a fictional one." So it's important to note that when you have these different military teams, these different protagonists, these different settings, of course it makes sense that the instrumentation is informed by what the player is playing as. So the British SAS, for example, has more of an orchestral score, and part of their missions take them to Ukraine, near the site of the Chernobyl disaster, which kind of influences and adds some sad, ghostly, spectral cues. Meanwhile, the American Marine Corps, they have some more guitars in their score. It's a little harder that way. But their visits to Middle Eastern countries add instruments like the oud and the bouzouki. And if I have to mention the bouzouki again, I have to finally figure out what that actually looks like, because I feel like that's the third time I've talked about the bouzouki.
I believe so, yes. One of them was Uncharted 3, right? What was the second one?
It was just last week with The Witcher.
Oh,
with The Witcher 3. So
yeah,
really recent, really relevant. This score even apparently also has a hurdy-gurdy. So like it just keeps coming. And because this was more of like a level-based linear game, Barton took more of a cinematic approach to the score, which was, different than, some of the dynamic scores that might adapt to what the player is doing in game. This was recorded at Abbey Road Studios in London. And I found while researching this that this is like a really weird soundtrack. It's very inconsistent with, how people present tracks from the game or title them or what's involved in the track, because there doesn't seem to be an official soundtrack release of this game. Yeah, that changed for Modern Warfare 2, maybe because of Hans Zimmer's involvement. I don't know. But for this one, it's just inconsistent. It's a scattershot. Even for these soundtrack playlists, a lot of the names are kind of based off of the mission that the player is going through in the game. So this won't be on Spotify. In fact, it may be a little questionable about YouTube.
The main menu music is on Spotify, actually. I checked about 5 minutes. That's it, though.
Okay. That's good to know. Just that one in particular, because the rest are just kind of haphazard and happenstance. And I happen to have the soundtrack on my computer, so that's what I used to reference. So maybe it wasn't the soundtrack, but it was a soundtrack version. But we'll start with those 5 critical tracks. And you're right, we'll start with the first one, Main Menu. I do sometimes see this referenced as main theme, but I'm pretty sure you can guess where this one plays in the game.
Final mission.
Yeah, final boss. That's exactly what it is. No, you're sitting on the main menu. You're kind of browsing, setting your settings, and you get this sense of this score. This is one I believe. Again, I can't say for certain, but I believe this one is composed by Harry Gregson Williams. And honestly, it sounds like right out of Metal Gear. So yeah, that makes sense. That checks out.
Oh yeah, you could feel the Metal Gear off of this song.
Absolutely. And it's, in a way, it's almost like Metal Gear Solid 2, where like it adds these kind of like this chill electronic vibe to it. So yeah, I think this is a pretty well-known one. I was, checking with, I mentioned my brother who built a gaming PC like specifically for this game. And he's like, yeah, this one in particular is especially memorable. So, yeah, I definitely wanted to mention this one. It's a good one for sure. The second critical track, though, we're going to get into the missions now. And this one is Crew Expendable. Got those strings, the brass, the percussion just right away. It hits you with that intensity. Just let's go. Let's get into it. This is probably the music riff I remember most from the game personally. One where I listened to it was like, oh yeah, I definitely, resonate and remember this one. This is because it takes place during the Crew Expendable mission, which is the second level of the game, but it's the first actual mission after the tutorial mission. So you're playing as Soap here, and the SAS must retrieve a package on board an Estonian freighter known as the Valjakutse. Man, Estonian, huh? Wow. But yeah, this is the the screenshots that you may have seen from this game where like you're riding in a helicopter and you're looking at Captain Price, and it's very like blue colored. It's dark and blue in the color scheming. And then you're getting on this freighter ship, almost in a very similar way, like the tanker incident in Metal Gear Solid 2, or the opening scenes of Captain America: Winter Soldier. Like a very similar vibe in that sense. And you're going through the ship and you're trying to secure this package. So yeah, this is like a good energy Call of Duty song right away. One that I really wanted to put here for sure.
I think of your 5 critical tracks, this is probably my favorite. But yeah, it does sound, again, this is another like very Metal Gear kind of song, but also like at a certain point then it also becomes, what does it remind me of? It kind of reminds me of Star Wars a little bit.
Interesting.
Slightly. I think it's some of the instrumentation, but yeah. Oh, it's a good song.
Yeah, definitely like it. Number 3 on the Critical 5, The Bog and the War Pig. So this is one where, you're probably not going to find this on YouTube specifically in this way, because it contains music from 2 missions. You have The Bog, which is the 6th level of the game, where the Marines must reach and protect a disabled Abrams tank. So there you go. Here's where the Abrams tank comes into play and all that inspiration there. Whereas War Pig is a separate level. It's the 9th level in the game, so a few missions later. And it picks up directly after the events of the bog. So the Marines have to take that now fixed Abrams tank to then destroy an enemy tank. So the two are kind of connected here. I just really like this one. It's another one that it catches your ear very well, but mostly because it gives that weight and intensity of dealing with a tank, whether it's in operation or going alongside it. I think I really wanted to put this here because, as far as the research and development that went into this game, really, working with the Army and the Marines and all that. Yeah, you gotta kind of hear how that translates over to being alongside a tank. Number 4 on the critical track. It's a big one. This is Shock and Awe. This takes place during, you guessed it, the Shock and Awe mission. This is the 10th level of the game, about halfway through as far as levels are concerned, but it's just before the end of Act 1 of the 3-act story. And so, in this sense, the Marines are trying to capture Khaled al-Assad in his capital city when the unthinkable happens. And this is where I'll warn people, if you really don't want spoilers for a 12-year-old game, might want to skip to the next track. But we have to talk about something here for Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare, which was the moment that set storytelling in this series on its head and made people take notice. And I'm sure, Joe, even though you haven't played the game, you're well familiar with the nuke scene.
Now that you mention it, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of. Until you said the nuke scene, I had absolutely no idea what you were talking about.
So it kind of makes sense for the clip here that I played, because it plays during this moment. But you're trying to escape on a helicopter. You're pulling a soldier who's wounded, kind of dragging her back to the helicopter, making sure she gets out okay, that you get out okay. It's a firefight. It's hectic. It's crazy. And you made it out safely. But they're saying that there's intelligence that there's a nuke in the capital city. And they're trying to disarm it until it goes off. And the nuke goes off and the helicopter is spinning, and you have one of your comrades, your buddies that you're fighting with, flying out of the helicopter to the point where the helicopter crashes. You, as Paul Jackson of the Marine Corps, get out of the helicopter, and there's all this fallout around you. And one of the two main characters you're playing as is now dead. So, wow, Call of Duty. Yeah, to throw a nuke actually going off. An event that would be referenced throughout the Modern Warfare games. Like, that was a big game changer, and fortunately, the score that Stephen Barton put together for Shock and Awe supports it wonderfully.
Yeah, now that you mention it, I believe I was familiar with that scene. Sort of. I don't think I've ever seen it, but if I remember correctly, I want to say we talked about it at Youmacon one year, and this would have been after the game had come out.
Sure.
But I want to say that's where I remember hearing about the nuke scene for the first time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's one of those, like, video game touchstone moments. I mean, just, things like with BioShock and its big twist. I mean, things like you have a hard time staying away from not knowing. So that's a big one in this game. So this one definitely had to be here. But we'll wrap up the Critical 5 with Game Over.
Now, kind of weird that you would put a Pac-Man song here, but I guess this is a very important jingle in video games, the Game Over jingle from Pac-Man. This joke is nothing. Please continue.
If only they just did a little bit with instruments in the song, go wop, 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 wop. Or...
Now you gotta make it gunshots.
Yeah. This is the Game Over mission, which is the 20th and final level in the game. And so you're escaping this silo, you're reaching this extraction point where you're dealing with this onslaught of ultra-nationalists and everything is just coming to a head. The track really starts with this like high final boss level intensity, but I think the clip that I end up, choosing here to play is just this sense of relief and victory, and just shows the accomplishment. It helps flesh out the overall sound of what the score is doing here. It can't be all like crazy intense music in a firefight. Like there has to be some sort of accomplishment here. So I wanted to put it here because the track goes through a range. It's like 7 minutes long, at least the version I have. So yeah, it's important though. It's the final mission. What can you say?
I mean, it certainly sounds final mission-y for most of the song, but then yes, this part that you are taking the clip from, this is more Metal Gear as hell music. Like this is Metal Gear as hell.
You think Stephen Barton is Gregson Williams' protege or what? No, it's pretty.
I think so.
Pretty remarkable. So on the cutting room floor, I have a couple interesting tracks that I just could not justify putting them in the Critical 5, but I had to stick them here. The first one is Mile High Club. Now, Mile High Club is an optional mission that is an epilogue, but it has nothing to do with the Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare story, and you can only access it after beating Game Over, the final mission, and watching the credits all the way through. And once that happens, it'll load you right into this extra level. Now, you can also access it, through like a cheat code via the level select screen, but where's the fun in that? You're basically playing as an SAS member who needs to secure a very important person on an airplane and escape with them through this high altitude free fall. So just this extra little thing, just an extra little bonus. But the music is rather different. And like the score on this one is like driven by a drum machine. It's certainly more electronic, but I feel like it's more like secret agent film, like in a way, maybe like a Bourne sort of sound. So very different, but just an optional mission. So put it here on the cutting room floor. But the other one though, I gotta give a shout out to Deep and Hard.
Sergeant Briggs reporting for duty. Roger. Some say this belong in the movie, but this the third installment. Infinity Ward shit. Don't soil your drawers, cause it's deep in his hard, bitch. Ready for action. 50 cal started clapping. 4 horsemen kicking the rerun, asking what's happening. Too late for all that flapping. Out they gates with all those backed in. This one's from McMillan. 15 years you have relaxing.
Believe it or not, this is a song that plays during the credits. And it's performed by Infinity Ward's lead animator, Mark Grigsby, who was the performance, for voice and his performance capture, face and everything, for the in-game role of Sergeant Griggs. And so it's this rap that is very self-referential to Infinity Ward and how it's their third Call of Duty game, and even taking clips from what I think are like the E3 reveal of the game. But yeah, kind of rapping in character as Griggs to the point where it's like Griggs. And I just couldn't help it. I had to put it here.
And people give the DK rap flack. You can't see it, audio listeners, but I'm shaking my head and making a grimace look.
Yeah, this one is
sure is interesting.
Something special. Again, almost wanted to put it in the critical 5, but we'll put it on the cutting room floor. It's okay. So what will I never forget about Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare? It was the first Call of Duty game I ever played, and I played a good handful of them since. I skipped ones like Ghosts. That was probably for the best. So yeah, they're pretty hit or miss for me. Infinite Warfare, I probably got through the first quarter of it before dropping it, and I guess people like that one, but it depends. But I kind of like the Modern Warfare ones. So I'll be interested in giving this soft reboot a try, especially with modern and current game sort of thoughts about it. So, to play us out, to transition to the next game, I'd like to cover a YouTube fan remix, OC remix, cover, what have you, of one of the songs from this game. Came across a remix of the main menu theme for Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare by Lily Arciniega. And so Lily put this together, kind of reimagined it in a more current instrument set, and I think she did a really great job. So please enjoy. We'll be right back.
All right, let's shift gears slightly and talk about Oxenfree.
Not a game with the military, but forts.
A game where the military was there at one point.
Oh.
And they're kind of involved, but not it'll become clear later. I love this game, and I'm going to say it right now. I think this might have been one of the more interesting games to research that I've yet done on this show, personally. So let's get right into it, because this is going to be fun. So Oxenfree was originally released on PC and Xbox One on January 15th, 2016. A PS4 release followed in May of 2016. There was an Android release in June of 2017, and then it also released on the Nintendo Switch in October of 2017. I have played it on PC and Switch. I would recommend it on both things, though the Switch, I don't remember if the PC had the same problem, but the Switch had some issues with like long loading times. But that's really the only issue I had with it. It is a supernatural thriller developed by California-based studio Night School. In Oxenfree, you play as Alex, a teenage girl who has hopped on a ferry to the fictional Edwards Island. It is a fictional island out in, I want to say it's in like the Pacific Northwest, is where it's supposed to be. That's the sort of vibe that it's going for. In order to attend an all-night party where seniors go to the island to drink and cause mischief. On the ferry with her is her childhood friend Ren, who is a stoner that really, really likes to talk. And her new stepbrother Jonas, who she is meeting for the first time that night. So I guess the story is supposed to be like, she told somebody that she was going to her, to this party. And I guess her parents were like, oh, go get your new stepbrother, take him with you. Which sounds like hell to me, but whatever. Not like from Alex's perspective, maybe from Alex's perspective, but also from Jonas's perspective. I don't think I'd want to be either of them in that situation. And that's before the ghosts. Upon arriving at the island, they also join up with Clarissa, who is a girl that dated Alex's late brother Michael, and just really, really does not like Alex. Or anybody, it seems, except for Nona, who is Clarissa's best friend and Ren's love interest. So after a very, shall we say, tense game of truth or slap, no, not truth or dare, truth or slap, that is specifically brought up at a certain point, Alex, Ren, and Jonas go off to explore a set of caves where rumor has it tuning a radio to specific frequencies will cause supernatural things to occur. And unfortunately, as it usually does, even in real life, this accidentally leads to Alex using her radio to open a rift between dimensions, releasing a group of ghosts trapped inside. And then the entire group is scattered to different spots of Edwards Island. They must regroup not only to find a way off of the island, for which there are no more ferries until the morning, but also to find out exactly what's going on. Who are these ghosts? What does the sunken World War II submarine, the USS Kanaloa, have to do with all of this? And what was Maggie Adler, the island's only permanent resident before she passed away days prior to the story, hiding? The game plays in a 2.5 sort of approach. You're stuck on a 2D plane, but it's like an adventure game. Like think Monkey Island or something like that, where you can go onto different paths that are sort of 3D, but the game is 2D. It's really hard to explain, I think, but you get what I mean, I'm sure.
Yeah.
You can also pick how Alex responds to people talking to her. Pretty much exactly like a Telltale game. You only have a few seconds to decide. You are usually given 3 options for how Alex responds to things being said to her. And these options can change how certain characters feel about her, as well as what routes they end up going on throughout the story. For instance, your actions and responses can decide whether or not Ren and Nona begin dating at the end or don't like each other by the end. They also decide what kind of relationship Alex has with Jonas as her new stepbrother. Are they close? Do they really just not like each other? Do they not get along? That kind of thing. And multiple endings can be achieved depending on Alex's actions or inactions, because again, like I said, you're only given a couple of seconds to decide what you're going to say. And if you don't choose, much like a Telltale game, you just don't say anything. Multiple endings can be achieved, but not everything may be as it seems. So this is where I ask, what are your experiences with Oxenfree?
Don't know really anything about it, so this will be a good first exposure. On the other hand, though, it is a game I do have currently installed on my Xbox One. It is a game I have access to the PC version through various, free game of the month sort of things. And it's one that it kills me where it's a short enough game. I should play it. It's just haven't yet. So I am definitely looking forward to learning more because I've not heard any of the soundtrack. I probably did not even know that it was a girl that you play as the protagonist, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. I will go ahead and come out and say it from the start. This game is very up your alley.
Yep. The way you're describing it so far, absolutely.
So I think you would enjoy it quite a bit, and you should definitely give it a shot. I love this game. It was my game of the year in 2016, and that's about all I think I need to say. I've played it twice. I would play it a third time if given the option. I played it on stream actually this month. It was my first game for my NWR Halloween streams. And that stream went rather well. It's about 3 hours long, honestly.
Wow.
And that's if you don't go for some of the secrets, which not really a lot of need to nowadays, but at the time they were really cool, and we'll get to why in a second. But first, we got to get into how the game was made. Night School Studios was actually founded in October of 2014. Fitting, in October. It was actually, I think, October 1st, so we are just missing their 5th anniversary.
Yeah.
Which is kind of cool. They were founded by Sean Krenkel and Adam Hines. Hines previously worked at Telltale Games, worked on titles like The Wolf Among Us. While Krenkel had come from Disney Interactive, actually. And I believe he got laid off, and that's what led to Night School being founded. Because, Disney and their video game interests change constantly, like the goddamn weather. And that's also where he had met many of the people who would go on to work at Night School Studios. The pair are cousins, actually, and they had decided that they wanted to make a story-based game and just decided, screw it, let's do it. Let's make the game. They wanted to give the player more freedom than your usual story-based game, though. For instance, they felt like they didn't really want to focus on set pieces, which are a big crutch for video games, which nothing wrong with that. Good set piece is great, but they didn't want to focus on that. And they also didn't want to focus on cutscenes. They wanted you to, the way they said it, they never wanted to take control out of the player's hands, even if something was like happening. And there are a couple like cutscene moments, but for the most part, they succeeded in that. And in fact, the player can like take part in conversation in real time. Like they can interrupt people if they want. So rather than developing the game the way games are usually done, which is you make the game and then you put a story in it, they wrote the story and then built the game around that. That's a very interesting approach, I think. And it kind of really shows, in my opinion. Because, like I said, usually like you'll prototype a game out and the story will change a bunch while you're playing it. And, like the story is sort of a secondary thing to, even if your story's great, if the game plays like crap, nobody's going to play your game. So yeah, I found that neat as a person who thinks that most of my skills lie in writing and not in game. Yeah, cool approach.
We always like it when stories take the precedence.
Very much so. Me and you especially, I think.
Yes.
Like, that's
Yes.
totally our jam.
Mm-hmm.
They also had to lower the scope down to a manageable size because Night School was a very small development team. I believe it was like 5 people plus a couple of contractors total. So this meant that they had to use restraint on dialogue trees to make sure that they didn't become massively expansive. And this actually, I think, works to the game's advantage in multiple ways. Even so, the final script, according to Hines, is apparently 1,200 pages long with 12,000 different lines of dialogue.
I mean, yeah, when you compare, like, it adds up quickly because we were talking about Witcher 3 last week and it was like 450,000 words. And it's like, oh my gosh, yeah, but it's still a lot, especially when you consider team size.
Mm-hmm. Especially also considering 3-hour game. I saw parts of my research where I saw people saying like, yeah, I've played this game probably like 100 times because it was one of the developers making it. Like, obviously when you make a game, you have to play it a lot. It was like, I still sometimes find pieces of dialogue that I was not aware were in the game. So it's expansive. It's an expansive script. The goal for the story was to make something supernatural while not really necessarily veering straight into horror, at least not right away. I don't think I would call this game a spooky game, but I would not call Oxenfree a horror game per se. I think a thriller is the best way to describe it. A supernatural thriller or something like that. They wanted to make it so that it kind of felt like communicating with these otherworldly beings through Alex's radio was kind of fun. Until you realized what was actually going on, and then it stops being fun and starts being, oh, this is a problem that we should probably take care of. Which is a tone I think they get done very well. Like, they do it very well, I think. Inspirations for the game included things like the film Stand By Me, which is what inspired them to do a sort of coming-of-age story. That's, I believe, based on a Stephen King book about a bunch of kids going to see a dead body.
Mm-hmm.
And also the various works of Steven Spielberg, which was where the idea to also incorporate supernatural elements came from. And according to them, Alex was specifically based on the character from the TV series Freaks and Geeks, or a character, the main character. I've never seen the show.
That makes sense a lot. Yeah, the main character.
So, I mean, I'll take your word for it.
Do you know that show, when you go back and look at the cast, it's kind of incredible, actually. James Franco, Seth Rogen, Jason Segel.
Right.
Young Judd Apatow making that show. It's amazing.
That's why I've heard of the show.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. because it sounded familiar and I couldn't figure out why. That would be why. I think it was brought up on one of the McElroy podcasts at one point, actually. That might have been where I heard of it, because I've never seen it.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of Alex, though, and character inspirations specifically, artwork and character designs were done by Heather Gross, who based Alex's outfit on clothes that she actually wore as a kid, which I find kind of funny. This was actually Gross's first time being a lead on a project like this. And the exact quote she used when asked what it was like to suddenly be in charge of a project like this in terms of art, the quote she used was, "It's kind of like running a marathon, and then somebody hands you a baby and says, 'Congrats, you're a mom.' And you're just like, I don't even have a crib. What do I do?" Which is probably my favorite description of anything ever. She seemed like a very, very fun person to watch. In order to get fitting voices for the characters, which were a very important part, they used the entertainment industry-centric magazine Backstage, which I'm not familiar with, but how would I be? I'm not in the entertainment industry. To put out a casting call. But before the voices were in the game, lead engineer Bryant Cannon told a story about how they would have to rely on placeholder subtitles the whole time while they were playing. And they'd be playing and having to read the subtitles. And at one point he was just like, "This game kind of sucks. Oh no, what do we do?" But then the voices were put into the game, and this alleviated this fear. And he was like, "Oh, thank God, it's good. It actually is good to play." Oh. So that was a fun story to hear too. Hines would specifically sit in and direct all of the recording sessions because he was the writer. He wrote the whole script, which allowed him to rewrite any dialogue that didn't work while it was being spoken. So like if an actor would say a line and Hines would go, "No, that doesn't sound right." Or like in your voice, like that doesn't feel like what the character you're playing would say actually. And he would rewrite it on the spot and then they would record that line. So, boy, that worked out really well because the dialogue is some of the best parts of Oxenfree for sure. And all of the lines were actually recorded out of order and separately from each other. You'll hear about games sometimes where like the voice actors are in the same room and they're able to play off of each other. This was not one of those games. I don't see how it would have even worked being one of those games because there's so many variations on how a conversation could go that would have been impossible.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of voices, the only one that I could find like information on was Alex's voice actress, which is Erin Yvette.
Oh, love her.
Her other work includes Snow White in Wolf Among Us, Vicky Vale in Batman the Telltale series, as well as having done work in Firewatch, Fortnite, The Walking Dead, Minecraft Story Mode, 2064 Read-Only Memories, and a ton of other games that I would actually be here all day if I kept listing them.
She is Sasha in Tales from the Borderlands. And yeah, she is excellent in those other Telltale projects. Snow White, Vicky Vale, is so good. She's fantastic.
She's very good as Alex as well. I can vouch for this.
All right, so now I have to play this game. Like, sold.
Alongside her are Aaron Kuban as Ren, Gavin Hammond as Jonas, Avital Ash as Clarissa, and Brittany Johnson as Nona. In terms of overall art style, I found this quite interesting. The dark and natural-looking environment of Edwards Island. It's a lot of forests, a lot of cliffs, stuff like that. It was specifically made to clash with the supernatural elements of the story. Whenever you see like the gates into the other dimension where the ghosts are, they're just like these jagged triangles and geometric shapes and all that. And so I never thought about that, but yeah, they are meant to look out of place in the overall environment that the whole game takes place in, which makes sense. And apparently a lot of Gross's inspiration for the environment of Edwards Island came from spending summers in a small town in Oregon and walking around the beaches and the woods around her. Like as a kid, she just said like every summer we went to this small town, but she also had to deal with one problem, And that was that she's an artist by trade. She does her painting in Photoshop. All of the backgrounds in this game were specifically done in Photoshop and made with sort of a watercolor aesthetic. It's really nice. But she likes to paint things subtly, as she says. This does not work in a video game
No.
because she kept running into problems where playtesters could not figure out, like, can I interact with this? Can I do something with this? And they had to keep telling her, like, they can't tell they can climb this wall. Heather, you need to, you need to paint it in a way so that they can tell. And she said that this was one of the biggest hurdles for her to figure out. But in the end, I think she did a very good job. It's very easy to tell what can be interacted with, what can't be. Very impressive, actually. So the game itself was officially announced at the 2015 Game Developers Conference. After the release, Skybound Entertainment actually approached the team to make a series of short documentary videos about the production of the game, and that's actually where a lot of this information has come from. There are 5 episodes of it. There is an episode on the story, episode on the mechanics, on the artwork, on the engine, I think, on programming just in general. And then there's an entire one on the music, which we'll get to in a minute. Which, yes, perfect. Perfect for us. I did not know that this documentary series existed, despite being a very big fan of this game in this studio, until a couple days ago. So it was a welcome discovery. There was also an ARG, and I wasn't aware of this either. So in-game, you can actually find little anomalies throughout the game. And these anomalies, when you tune your radio to the correct frequency, will give you a hint that will lead to a number. And these numbers lead to a real-life phone number, which in turn led to a Twitter account that posted cryptic messages that were related to people that called this phone number, and also some other stuff. And they seem to be hinting at a real life location. They seem to be leading to a real life location. And then I guess YouTuber Jesse Cox posted a video that contained several letters that had been highlighted in red. I think it was a modified version of the launch trailer for the game, which led people to the website edwardsisland.com, which contained messages, one of which was the message, "Milner is Ward." Fort Milner in game is the decommissioned military fort that exists on Edwards Island. It is a World War II era military fort. And it was, people figured out that this hint meant that it was comparing the game's Fort Milner to the real-life Fort Ward in Washington. And upon going to Fort Ward, players found letters from Alex describing all the different possible timelines in the game, because time loops and stuff are a very big part of Oxenfree, as well as a manually operated tape player that used like reel tape, like the paper reels with the holes in them, where you slip them in and you did the crank and it makes the like music box makes the sound, playing 2 songs from the game's soundtrack.
Wow. The
game was very well received by critics. Its highest Metacritic rating is actually the iOS version, surprisingly enough, sitting at an 87. Its lowest rated is the Xbox version, sitting at a 78. And the game was mostly praised for the unique way that it handles its dialogue, which absolutely deserved. I believe it also got some for the art style, stuff like that, which honestly means mission accomplished for the game that they had set out to make in the first place. It was nominated for several awards, including Best Storytelling, Best Indie Game at the Golden Joysticks, Best Narrative at the Game Awards, Outstanding Achievement in Story at the DICE Awards, Best Debut for Night School Studios, and Best Narrative at GDC, but the only one that it actually won was the Excellence in Visual Art Award at the Indie Games Festival. But it was nominated for all those, which I consider still a victory, honestly.
Yeah, definitely a notable indie game of the last few years. Like it's important to play, and is why I got to.
And apparently, alongside the docuseries announcement, Skybound also said that they had confirmed it for a film adaptation. This was back in 2016, We have not heard a single thing about it since then. I really don't believe it's happening. I'll go see it. If you put it in theaters, I will go see it. Like, you can have my money. I'll go see it twice. I don't care if it sucks. But Night School themselves has since released a mobile game based on the TV show Mr. Robot called Mr. Robot 1.51 Exfiltration with a 0 instead of an O. Sure. And then they almost were brought down with Telltale.
Ooh.
Which I didn't know about this. Apparently, after Telltale got the license to create a game based on the Netflix series Stranger Things, which you might remember was one of the last contracts that they had picked up before closing, they actually contracted Night School to produce a companion game for them. But after a while, communication just started to break down between the two studios. Telltale started getting a little bit dodgy. And then, of course, they surprised the whole world in 2018 when they said, yeah, we're closing.
Mm-hmm.
Bye. Luckily, Night School was working on a second game at the time. They were working on their own project alongside the Stranger Things project. Otherwise, they would have had a hell of a time. I think they imply this possibly could have sunk the company, but they were working on another game, and that game actually comes out next week on October 29th. It is called After Party. It is about teens trying to out-party Satan in hell. It looks absolutely hilarious. It is my greatest regret about E3. When I went to E3, I got to go play Creature in the Well, which was set up in the Microsoft Theater. And set up right next to the Microsoft Theater was After Party. And I could have played After Party because I had an extra slot, but I didn't know that because I thought I had an appointment in 20 minutes. Turns out that appointment got canceled. But I was able to talk to the person there, one of the people from Night School, and be like, did you work on Oxenfree? And she hadn't. She was one of the new hires for After Party specifically. And I was like, please pass on the message. Like, I love Oxenfree. It's so good. I cannot wait for After Party. She told me that After Party is still coming out on Switch. It is not on any of their marketing. and it's not coming out on Switch next week. It'll be on, I believe, PS4 and PC specifically. I don't know if it's even coming out on Xbox.
And Xbox One. It is part of Xbox Game Pass. So that is how I am interested to try it.
I am super looking forward to that game. You should be too. Pick it up. Play Oxenfree. They do good work. Night School does some really, really good work. I look forward to seeing what they do from here. Honestly, great game. The music for Oxenfree was done by one Andrew Rohrmann. He is also known on the internet as Scientific, that is spelled SCNTFC, though apparently his previous alias before this was Scientific American, and that's just all spelled out.
I think that's the name of a magazine, so they probably weren't too happy.
That was probably why he ended up changing it. Also, SCNTFC is a cooler name anyways.
Yeah, and I think it's also his Twitter handle, so go check him out there.
I can't find a huge amount of information on his actual previous career before this, but according to his Wikipedia article, he is a sizable name in the Seattle indie rock scene, alongside his band Hush Harbor. And apparently early in his career, he also gained an interest in, quote, using a computer as his main instrument. And so with that in mind, he formed production company Polar Empire in 2001 alongside fellow musician Plastic Phantom. And they apparently mainly do music for commercials and stuff. Companies that were listed that they have worked for include Nike, Volkswagen, AMC, a couple others like that.
Neat.
But that's really all I can find about the person. As for his discography, he was apparently the sound designer for the Xbox 360 dashboard in 2011. So that's him, if you're hearing the sounds there. That's kind of cool. This is the first time I think that we've talked about a composer that was responsible for hardware sound.
Yeah, and I want to say that was kind of around the time of, what do they call it, the new Xbox experience or something like that. So yeah, probably the last years of the 360.
But he's also done quite a few game soundtracks. He's been working in the games industry for 10 years, I think they said. He did the soundtracks for Vector Z, Space Ranger, which I've never heard of, but I have heard of Galak-Z, Galak-Z. I've never played it, but I have heard of it. I'm pretty sure I own it. It's just one of those games that a lot of people with Steam just have. Mm-hmm. He does work with Night School a lot. He did the soundtrack for their Mr. Robot game. He is also coming back to be the composer for After Party. And outside of After Party, his most recent project was a game called Old Man's Journey. So that is the career of Andrew Rohrmann. Now, as for actual research about the development of this soundtrack, again, really helps when there is a documentary episode specifically about the music, which is how I learned some really cool stuff. According to Hines, the direction that Rohrmann was given was just a bunch of random prompts. Like the example he gave during the interview was, it's like, we want something that's like John Carpenter meets Boards of Canada meets, and he was like, he just gave him like this random hodgepodge of suggestions. And then he came out with pretty much exactly what we expected. So that's really impressive, honestly. Rohrmann was apparently a friend of Krankel. And according to him, he ended up reaching out to him because he noticed Rohrmann's name on a petition that he was signing, like 3 names above him, and said, "Oh yeah, that guy. He does music." And then he reached out to him and found out, "Oh, you do music in the games industry? I had no idea. Well, I'm making a game. Do you want to do the music for it?" And he said yes. And the music of this game is not actually scored to particular scenes, but instead to match the overall vibe of the game and some overall moments. So it's meant to give a general attitude of Oxenfree, less than this is the song that plays during this scene and stuff like that. And the coolest part is a lot of it was done with, they wanted a mixture of analog and digital sound. Basically, quote, the vibe they were going for was, quote, nostalgic while not being set in a specific time in the past. Now, the way that he accomplished this was he just went out and bought a bunch of old tape decks and ran sounds through that. So during the interview, he specifically says, people on Reddit would ask, what filter did you use to get this sound? And he was like, I didn't have a way to answer them, because the answer was, I bought this model of tape deck from the 80s and played the sound through that and recorded it.
You can definitely tell, there's a lot of interesting stuff on this soundtrack, for me hearing the tracks for the first time, and we'll hear them shortly, but, just a lot of electronic sounds, but it's a lot of pitch playing and a lot of pitch warbling, and it's because of that old tape and that that's the analog sound. You can probably do some digital effects with it too, but it does have a distinct sound to it for sure.
One of the examples he used was a cassette player where he would plug in the output plug. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
That would plug into a speaker, and then he'd plug it into itself.
Oh.
And play that to get some of the sounds. Which just, what a cool way to make sound effects and music and stuff for a game. He also, for Alex's radio, he went out and bought a World War II era radio, figured out how it works, and used that to make the sounds of Alex's radio.
I'm not even going to ask on how much he might have spent for that.
Probably more than I make in a month. That, it was, and he showed it. It was an antique radio. And the way he describes his thought process is he was like, I could go and get a stock sound effect off the internet, or I could buy a World War II era radio and figure out how it works. And it was like, why would I not take that second option?
Especially if you nickname yourself Scientific.
Yeah. So let's hop in to some of that music with our 5 critical tracks. And the first and coolest from a research standpoint, we're going to start with Beacon Beach. The melody of this song is apparently Morse code.
It's so cool. I love it.
The beat apparently spells Maggie over and over as a reference to Maggie Adler, the woman that lives on the island, or lived on the island. She's dead by the time the game starts. A modified version of this song was apparently put up at one point, and I believe that is now the version that I think it's in the game. It's the one you'll find on YouTube, stuff like that. But it added more Morse code to the game, and it was meant to nudge along people taking part in the ARG, because at a certain point, the Twitter account started deleting tweets, and people were starting to freak out, like, what if it deletes one that we need to solve the puzzle? And so it splits 2 messages in Morse code onto the different channels. So the left channel says, deletes not needed, please stand by, which was Rohrmann's way of saying, don't worry about it. The deleted tweets, they don't matter. They're not what you need. Don't worry about it. The right side says SOS Kanaloa over and over again, which is a reference to the sunken submarine that our officers were actually... which is a reference to the sunken submarine that our ghosts were actually the officers of. Ooh. And like, this song was on the list before I knew this, but now that I know that it's Morse code, what? Of course that's on the Critical 5. That's so cool.
It's definitely a really good one we can just listen to and just kind of trance out into it. I think this one's probably my favorite, actually.
It's one of the earlier songs that you hear in the game. And yeah, I think it's one of my favorites too. It's such a good song. Though I think it's, for me, narrowly beaten out by our second critical track, Catbird Station. So this melody actually tends to play when you are actually communicating with the ghosts, usually through, like, they talk through radio snippets. It's one of my favorite creepy methods of something communicating ever. It's so cool. They put so much work into making it sound just wrong. So it'll be like, at one point they make reference to Maggie Adler. And Alex is like, what does that old woman have to do with this? And they respond with, that woman was young once. And it's different voices for every word. And it sounds like it's like, you know how Bumblebee talks in the bad Transformers movies? Where he talks through the radio, like by tuning to stations and getting the words he's looking for, which is vastly unrealistic, but whatever, who cares? Yeah. I'll believe ghosts can do that, but not robots from space. You can't convince me otherwise. It's that kind of thing. And it's so well done. It's so cool. And this song matches the vibe of talking to these otherworldly beings and like how they feel unnatural and wrong and sinister. And there's not much to the melody. It's just like, it's 3 notes repeating over and over again for the most part. But it does its job so well. It's also a melody that is present in the song Catchpole Station, which I almost made the critical track, but last minute decided not to. Decided to go with Catbird instead. This is just a fantastic piece. After that, our number 3 track is Kanaloa. These are just some deep, heavy sort of bass notes, almost. Some of them are kind of muffled, but it gives it this sort of dire feeling. But there's also not this feeling of like it's not hopeless, but it's also not, it's not happy. It's mysterious and big and present, but it's not overwhelming. Is how I would describe it, I think. And then in the later half of the song, you get this nice beat to it. And I think this is a good mix of a soundscape and a song. And it's one you hear a lot in the documentary series that I watched.
I don't know if I'd make the full comparison to Silent Hill 2, but when you're talking about like soundscapes and deep bass notes, it kind of reminded me of that just slightly, ever so much.
Slightly, yeah. I could see that, though I think my next track is more Silent Hill-ish.
Yeah.
But yeah, I could absolutely see that. And speaking of Silent Hill-ish and my next track, our 4th critical track is The Gate. The way that I would describe this song is that it sounds wrong. Like the whole thing is playing out of a broken radio, which is not actually far from the truth. I know now. The radio probably wasn't broken, but it was probably playing out of like an old radio. And it's just got this evil and atmospheric feeling, and I kind of get chills when I hear this song. I think I know where it plays, and I believe it plays at the end, like during the finale, but I don't know that for sure.
Might make sense based on the title. Yeah, this is one where you definitely hear the warbling pitches. So if you want to hear 100%. Like what a good sense of that is like, definitely give this one a close listen.
Yeah, I love this song. I use it for inspiration for the tabletop session that I'm currently running, because I'm putting that notch in my nerd belt, I guess, probably for the one time. But yeah, just really, really good piece. And then, last but not least, probably the most recognizable song. Well, second most recognizable song. I think Beacon Beach has it beaten out. But The Beach, 7 a.m. It's the credits theme. Everything turned out all right. Or did it? Dun, dun, dun. Now, I think this is the song that I personally think about most when I think about Oxenfree. And I kind of consider this to be like the main theme of the game. This is one of the songs that actually played in the music box for the ARG. I don't remember what the other one was, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. But I do know that the Beach 7 a.m. was one of them for sure.
Very cool. Yeah, a good list. Definitely kind of opened my ears a little bit to what to expect when I go and play this for the first time.
This was one of those where I was listening to it all night last night, and then I'd hit a track and like, no, I should put this on the list. No, I should have put this on the list. But what would I take out? Just one of those, and that's never a bad problem to have, except for my stress levels. Then it's a bad problem to have.
Whenever you come across a track and you're like, oh yeah, that's a classic. Like, that's always the best feeling.
But in terms of tracks on the cutting room floor, I have two. One is the song Dead Light. This one's kind of just here for me. I just kind of like this more atmospheric song. It's got these tense swells and this radio sounding goodness, and this is just generally what I expect from a general track in Oxenfree, I think. But there's nothing like overly amazing about it. It's just, it's here for me. And also, Against the Rocks.
See, I would have thought this one was for you.
This is also for me, honestly, but this is also here because I think this is like the best example on the soundtrack of Andrew Rohrmann got really weird with this soundtrack. And I think this is the best example of that. Because it's just like the weird out of tune sounds and the warbling and the chaotic piano that doesn't quite match with the rest of the song. Oh, I love it. And this is also another song that was widely used in the Skybound doc. So, hey, had to go on here in some form. I think when I used to run my game music radio show on campus at my school, I'm pretty sure that I used this song to represent Oxenfree in my end of the year show. So there's that connection there as well. So what will I never forget about the game? Again, it was my game of the year in 2016. I don't remember what else came out that year, but I remember it being a pretty good year, but this was still like easily on the top of my list. And I think it just has to do with the fact that the voice performances are fantastic. The way the dialogue works is extremely immersive and good. The game is a good length, I think, for what it is. If it was much longer, it probably would have started to get slightly stale. The atmosphere is masterful. And just ghosts talking through radio is so cool. They're so cool. And just, even if you aren't super into like spooky games and stuff like that, this is a game you should check out. And I'll reiterate, like, you specifically need to check out this game.
Yeah, you sold me on it. That's for sure. To note some of the games of 2016, Overwatch was the big one for Game of the Year winners that year. Uncharted 4, Inside, Forza Horizon 3, and we talked about Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, Blood and Wine, as far as a big RPG one there. But yeah, it was a pretty good year. Stardew Valley, little game like that. So it was a good year. I mean, but 2017, the next year was, oh my God, better.
Yeah. But yeah, Oxenfree blew me away that year, and I'm very excited for After Party. I'm gonna buy it, and you should too, listener, because it looks hilarious, and I still am so mad at myself that I did not play it when I had the chance.
You gotta out-drink the devil. Well, you know what? I think based on our connections of, having a fort that, events take place at in Oxenfree, and then the military in Call of Duty. It works. It's pretty good. Good soundtracks that we both, learned from, zero to little experience with these games, but hopefully you learned a lot listening at home there, listener. We certainly did for our respective games. So that will do it for this week on Original Soundchat. You can find me on Twitter at Pete Speakeasy. Joe is over at The Rubaga. You can find the video version of the podcast on the Rhymes with Asia YouTube channel, also at rhymeswithasia.com. But it's that MP3 podcast version you want over on Anonymous Dinosaur at anondino.squarespace.com. But you can get it on podcast services all around the globe. Apple Podcasts, Google Play. Take it with you on a run, in your car, at work. We won't tell your boss that you're listening to a podcast talking about video game soundtracks, and hopefully you enjoy listening to that wherever you do. You can follow us and interact with us on social media at Soundchat OST. You can leave feedback for us on how we're doing, or tell us certain games that you'd like us to cover on the show. That Spotify playlist. You mentioned the one main menu song for Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare is there, but what about Oxenfree?
Oxenfree is indeed on Spotify.
Excellent.
Which is great for me.
Yes, terrific indeed. For bonus tracks, I definitely owe you all listening out there our next interview that we had with a composer. But life's kind of crazy right now. And then this other show that we're working on, I'm almost wondering if we may just start with our first episode at the end of the year. So just keep an eye on that. We may be doing that. Joe, who are we talking about next week?
Next week, I am finally talking about Kazumi Totaka.
Oh, definitely a long time coming, but certainly worth it. I will be talking about Shinji Hosoe. So Shinji Hosoe, what has he done? Just like what has Kazumi Totaka done? All of the games he's done. It'll be a good way to wrap up spooky October. Joe, let's play us out.
So, as we've stated before, we'd like to highlight fan cover, fan remix, OC remix, YouTube, that kind of thing. Surprisingly hard to find remixes of this game. And by surprisingly hard, I mean I'm not super surprised. How would you even? But I did manage to find one of the song Epiphany Fields. It is a garage rock cover by YouTuber Ferd K. So please enjoy that.
Thank you so much for listening this week on Original Soundchat. We'll see you next time. Take care.